Hello, I'm Barbara Glakas, and welcome to another episode of Herndon's Hidden History. We're standing here by the iconic Herndon train depot, just one of many structures that was built in the 1800s and before. Let's take a closer look at some of the historic structures that still stand in Herndon today. The oldest house still standing in Herndon is the Payne House on Drainesville Road, dating back to the late 1700s. It was built by a farmer named George Payne. George Payne's uncle, William Payne, was a close friend of George Washington. Here we see the house marked on a survey map dated 1790. We believe this house may date back as far as 1783. Two chimneys mark the original dimensions of the house, with a T portion added on after the Civil War. The house remains a private residence today. The Herndon Railroad Depot was built in late 1859 or 1860. It was originally part of the Alexandria, Loudoun, and Hampshire Railroad. Changes have been made to the building over the years, with additions made to each end to enlarge it. In the early years, the depot also housed the Herndon Post Office and a general store. It was also the location of many early town council meetings. After rail service stopped in 1968, the depot was abandoned and fell into disrepair. It was in danger of being torn down, but by a single vote on the Herndon Town Council, it was saved. For a time, the depot housed various town government offices. But since 1981, the depot has housed the Town Museum, run by the Herndon Historical Society. Also associated with the old railroad is this old stone railroad bridge that was built on the east side of town over Sugarland Run. You can still see the stone railroad bridge today underneath the W&OD hike and bike trail, not far from the Herndon Police Station. This old house is commonly called the Yellow House because it has always been some shade of yellow. It was built in the 1860s, most likely by a family named the Lesters. In this old photo of what is now Lynn Street, you can see the house in the background, positioned on Eldon Street. For many years, the home belonged to the family of Thomas Reed, the town's first undertaker. In the 1930s, the Reed sons moved the Yellow House back to the rear of their lot in order to make way for the construction of a new brick home for their mother, a building which is now the Adams Green Funeral Home today. In the 1990s, the Yellow House was in danger of being demolished to make way for additional parking behind the funeral home, but it was ultimately saved and moved to the corner of Pearl and Oak Streets, where it remains as a private residence today. Dating back to about 1900 is this old gas generating station, and it's located across the street from the Herndon Municipal Center on Lynn Street. It was part of the Herndon Gas Company that was formed to provide gas for the streetlights in downtown Herndon and for lights in a few of the town's more affluent homes. It was one of the only surviving structures on this block after the town's devastating big fire in 1917. You can see the gas house after the fire on the left side of this photograph. In the 1990s, the gas house was restored and improved by the Herndon Historical Society. Educational displays were added to the interior of the gas house that explains how the gas house once worked. The exterior of the gas house was also improved with landscaping and a bench. Next to the old gas house is the former location of Moffat's Blacksmith Shop, the last blacksmith shop in the town of Herndon. You can see the remains of its stone foundation in this photograph. In this old photo, you can see Mr. Moffat on the right shoeing a horse at his blacksmith shop. His father first built the shop in 1906. It burned down in the 1917 big fire, and then it was immediately rebuilt that same year. In the 1970s, the blacksmith shop was sold to the Fairfax County Park Authority. The building was taken apart, board by board, and moved over to the Frying Pan Park on Centerville Road, where it was rebuilt and remains today. It is the last known original working blacksmith shop left in Fairfax County. Old turn-of-the-century spring houses can be seen on Herndon Centennial Golf Course. These represent the days before the town had its own water system, when residents had their own cisterns, wells, and spring houses. This one on the golf course derived its water from the spring along Folly Lick Branch. This other old spring house was restored in 1991 by volunteers with funds raised by the Herndon Ladies Golf Club, the Herndon Historical Society, and other private donations. Old barns also dot the Herndon landscape. They remind us of our town's farming history. Some barns remain mostly in their original form, while others have been renovated reusing some of its original materials. The oldest commercial building in town is the Nachman Building located at 718 Lynn Street. The building was constructed over the course of a few years between the years 1869 and 1874. Its original intent was to house retail on the ground floor and residential and office space on the second floor. In its earlier years, it had a grocery store on the bottom floor. You can see in this old photo, dated around 1909, that it also once housed the Herndon Post Office. The Nachman family took full ownership of the building in 1919, operating a clothing store downstairs and living in the upstairs apartment. The Nachman family still owns the building today. The ground floor is currently occupied by the Green Lizard Cycling Shop. Another very old commercial building is located at the corner of Eldon and Spring Streets. Built around 1899, this old building was once a residence and a general merchandise store called Wilkins & Brothers Store. Magnus T. Wilkins, a former Herndon mayor, operated his general store in the building for almost 40 years. Since that time, the building has housed many different businesses. Today, the building is the home to Jimmy's Old Town Tavern on the ground floor and the Roaches in the Attic antique store on the second floor. Not too far away is a small old house on Monroe Street that was built right before the Civil War. It once belonged to Nathaniel and Catherine Kitty Kitchen Hanna, who both witnessed Civil War action in our area. It is now home to Nana and Pop's Thrift and Collectibles store. Herndon also has two historic stone homes. One is a home called Elward Stone, located at the corner of Ferndale and Vine Streets. Built in 1876, it was the home of Isaiah Brady, Herndon's first mayor. Another old stone home in Herndon is the Carroll House, an arts and crafts era stone cabin built in circa 1909 by James Hawkins, a banker and a farmer. The cabin is located in Runnymede Park, a 58-acre natural park on the east side of the town of Herndon. The stone house is the only home in Herndon that still resides in its original habitat. The oldest church in Herndon is the former Northern Methodist Episcopal Church located at 800 Eldon Street at the intersection of Center Street. The church was built in 1872 and is still used as a church today. A couple doors down from the church is its former parsonage, built circa 1874. The part of the house with the bay window is its original section. In the attic, you can still see its original joists that are made of round, hand-hewn logs. Another very old church is the original St. Timothy's Episcopal Church at the corner of Eldon Street at the intersection of Grace Street. Built in the late 1870s, it was consecrated in 1881. The old church is now the home of the Herndon Masonic Lodge. Although Herndon's 1917 big fire burned down all the buildings that were formerly on the north side of Pine Street, many of the old buildings on the south side of Pine Street still remain today. These 1890s buildings were once homes and offices and now house small businesses. This old home at 1715 Pine Street later turned into the town's telephone switchboard building, and now it is occupied by the Herndon Clock and Watch Company. This building at 711 Pine Street was once a doctor's office belonging to Dr. Edwin Detweiler. It is now occupied by the Brushstrokes Hair Salon. The oldest school building still standing in Herndon is the former Herndon School at 725 Center Street, believed to have been built in the late 1860s or early 1870s. An addition was later added onto the school in the 1870s, making it a T-shaped building. The school moved from this location in 1912. The old school building is now a private residence. Another historic school is the Herndon Seminary at 863 Grace Street, built in 1881. The seminary school was also the home of Mary Lee Morrison Castleman, a cousin of General Robert E. Lee. Mary and her daughters ran the school, a private boarding and day school for girls up through high school age and for boys up through 12 years old. The old seminary building is now a private residence. Herndon's Chestnut Grove Cemetery is located on Dranesville Road. It was formally established around 1880, although some graves there date prior to that. The cemetery includes many grave sites of those who served in the Civil War, as well as some reinterred grave sites of those who served in the War of 1812. Another old grave site is that of Laura Radcliffe, a Civil War spy who lived close by on Centerville Road. Laura was known to provide valuable intelligence to General Jeb Stuart and Colonel John Mosby during the war. Laura Radcliffe's gravesite is located in the town of Herndon on the west side of the Worldgate Center's Marriott Hotel. The town of Herndon is steeped in history, and many old vestiges of that history still remain today. That's all for this episode of Herndon's Hidden History. Thanks for joining us.